Hey guys, so I'm sure by now you've heard that Min Hee-jin, the creator of New Jeans, actually got fired by HYBE as the CEO of ADOR. Yes, I will say it again. She got fired. She is no longer the CEO of ADOR, controlling and sticking around the 16th floor as the queen of a wretched empire. But how did it happen? We thought that with her clever maneuvering back in May with her injunction with the court, that she was sort of like one of these squatters that the owner of an apartment complex could not get out because she went and stopped an eviction notice. So what did HYBE do? What was it doing behind the scenes? And is this actually going to stick? So I know many of you were frustrated with this scenario, this puzzlement, this question of how could HYBE own 80% of ADOR and yet not be able to fire the CEO. I want to go over the actual missing link. It's almost as if you see a piece of furniture come together and you're like, yeah, but where is that missing screw that puts it together? You just say it's going to stick together, but is it really going to stick? Because you're just saying like, oh, well, now it works. Some people are happy with she's gone. However, if you kind of don't want to have anxiety and really dig into it and see what HYBE did and why it's kind of interesting how they maneuvered this, then stick around. If you're just interested in the whole money explanation, because that's the thing that's leading the headlines, is that the shareholder contract got canceled and therefore she cannot cash in on her stock options, which basically means the HYBE is not going to overpay her money for her shares of ADOR. Then that's the end of the story. But you're like, how did you jump from one to the other, especially when up until like a couple days ago, everybody was under the assumption that that wouldn't be possible. So this thing was brewing in June, July. HYBE did not waste any time behind the scenes, it looks like, because we found out in the news a couple days ago here at the end of August, but really a lot of this had been set in motion around July, it seems. And so if you've been wondering why perhaps Min Hee-jin's been a little bit quiet, maybe she's been fighting this as well behind the scenes. So if you remember, let's go over why this shouldn't have happened based on our common understanding of Min Hee-jin's situation. Remember that she had this 5-year contract that she said was set in stone, and it seems as if the judge also agreed at her injunction. Remember, injunction just means like, stop this from happening. It doesn't mean anything about whether she's innocent or not. Her contract said that HYBE was required to keep her as CEO. And how did they enforce that? In the contract, it said that HYBE was required at shareholder meetings to always vote for her to be the CEO until November 2026. Now, we got upset with this judge. I still am upset with that judge and judges in general in Korea. However, if we do look at this in a positive light, in terms of the judge was trying to be very true to the science, I guess, of contract law, it did say that at the shareholders meeting, HYBE was required to vote for her to stay on as CEO for 5 years if she didn't damage ADOR. She could be damaging, yes, all the windows and the basement and everything else. But as long as she didn't damage ADOR, then HYBE was required by her contract to keep her on as CEO. So, what did HYBE do to maneuver around this? Now, this is when you're just like, I do not want to be in the whole law system, because this is like one of these situations where you're looking at somebody like operating heavy machinery and you don't know which button's going to do what and what it has done and how to fix, go around a problem, because this is genius. So HYBE said that it would follow the law, and that's exactly what they should have done. You got to fight fire with the details. And they said that they followed the Commercial Act and the Articles of Incorporation, which is essentially the rules that you set up whenever you set up a company. This is the rules that we're going to go by. Now, the important thing here to know, to make it easy, is there's a difference between shareholder meeting and a board meeting. What they did in the end of May was a shareholder meeting. That's essentially like all the stock owners. Now, this is the reason why this looks a little confusing, is that it's a small group. It's like the same group that's the board of directors is like the same group that's the shareholders. So if you have a board of directors meeting or a shareholder meeting, it's essentially the same thing in this tiny, if you're thinking about like, we just have a tiny family, our extended family and the nuclear family is the same. But through the law, it's different. So at a shareholder meeting, HYBE was required to keep her on as CEO. However, what they did was a little bit tricky, is that over the summer, they did something that was like a cross between a shareholder meeting and a board meeting. They kind of like they said like, okay, now we're going to go into our board meeting, now we're going to go into our shareholder meeting. But what did they do? They basically removed her as a member of the board of directors. If you're kind of confused right now, you're like, what the heck? To be a CEO under Korean law, you have to become a member of the board of directors first. The concept there being is that the board of directors are the people who manage the company. They can be comprised of people who are working for the company in high executive levels and they're a member of the board. They can also come from outside. And a lot of times you want people outside of the company who are not working in the company, and you're supposed to not have a vested interest in the company so that you can be more of like a checks and balances on the CEO and the executives, make sure that, they're not doing weird stuff, which, And then also there can be people who are like not working for the company and not professionals who are outside, but just sort of like anybody. And I think that's a clause for like family members or something like that. So the board of directors, a lot of the times, are also shareholders, but not necessarily. Who normally has more power between shareholders and board of directors? It's the shareholders. The owners of the company are the shareholders. Now, in like a huge corporation where you're buying and selling stocks, you feel like, I have like a few stocks, like how much power do I have? But collectively, and then essentially whoever has the most amount of shares has the most amount of power, and they control who gets to be on the board of directors. Now, the board of directors themselves, yes, so they're basically, if HYBE owns 80% of the company, they basically can control who is on the board. But even if they don't heavily handed like control the decision of the board at that moment, the board of directors themselves can make decisions about the CEO and also who is on the board or not. Now, I had to clarify a lot of this weird gobbledygook because even from HYBE's side, there was like a lot of like conflicting messages going on. But this essentially is the strategy. In order to get rid of Min Hee-jin, you first get rid of her status as a board member, a board of directors member. So if she's not a board of directors member, then she's not eligible to be the CEO. How do you get rid of her as the board of director, one of the members of the board of directors? What they did was, I think they did a two-pronged approach that they are using as sort of like plan A and plan B. Plan A is essentially like, we're the board, we don't want you here anymore. Get out of here. So they can kick out a board member. However, let's say she's successful with saying like, I shouldn't be kicked off the board. Board memberships, like to be on a board, has a 3-year term by law. You can renew it if the other board members say like, yeah, we want you to stay on for another 3 years. However, her 3 years apparently is over this November. So they basically are saying like, we're not going to renew your board seat, and if you don't have a board membership, then you can't be eligible to be the CEO of ADOR. And therefore, if she's not the CEO of ADOR, then they don't have to fulfill any of the stock options that her CEO package entailed. It just basically disappears. Now, the reason why I got a little bit confused is that they said that they're going to keep her on as inside director, which implies that she's still on the board of directors, but yet she's fired as the CEO. So what I think that basically means is that they fired her as CEO, and maybe she can contest that in court, but by the time she would be able to file a lawsuit and get in front of a judge, it's going to be November, when she's going to be off the board anyway, because they're not going to renew her board seat. So for the time being, from end of August until November, HYBE can also say, yeah, she's a board member, wink wink, but we got rid of her as the CEO. They put in a person from HYBE who is an expert in HR. She went to Seoul National University. She has corporate experience and also tech experience in the gaming sector. And so she's going to be the CEO of ADOR. She was already appointed through this board mechanism. So that, in a nutshell, is how it happened. It's not going to be extremely clear because everybody is just saying the shareholder agreement got canceled. The shareholder agreement got canceled. What people are focusing on there, which is the biggest, loudest part of the story, is that Min Hee-jin is not going to get her $50 to $100 million payout. That's what people care about the most. I think that's what HYBE cares about the most. But if you're, I don't know, someone like me, just like, yeah, but how? And does this explanation really work? And is this legally sound? Like, even people who are lawyers in Korea and legal analysts say that this is a very tricky and complicated situation, but it does look like HYBE found its way. It found its yellow brick road. It is going to succeed in this, because what this does, essentially, it does honor the power of the shareholders that control the board of directors, and the board of directors, how they have to govern in Korea under corporate law, and the 3-year term, and whether you can be the CEO without being a member of the board of directors. Why does the CEO have to come from the board of directors? Because all of the people on the board of directors has liability. And so the buck stops with them. And so you want to have a CEO where they have skin in the game. And so that's why they have to come from the board of directors. However, it does also honor this situation where the shareholders do have the ultimate power. And that's important, especially in Korea, because Korea lives and dies off of the conglomerate structure. And in that case, the shareholders usually is controlled by the founding family, but they don't have usually, definitely not like 80% like HYBE has in terms of their ownership of ADOR. If they're lucky, more like 8%. But because the companies are so big, it's like so much money, nobody can, amass together usually 8%. But they live and die based on how much they can control without owning 50% plus one of their own family's company. And so this kind of stuff, the way that HYBE did it, they're acting like a corporation, and they have a supreme advantage here because they have 80% of the company. There's no challenges, there's no coalitions, there's none of this complicated thing about like building together enough shares to then overpower the decision making of the board. So usually you can have like a shareholders meeting and then you vote on things, and the company has to do it. Or you have a board of directors meeting, they meet and they vote on something and the company has to do it. The shareholders is more of like, okay, this is extremely important to us, or it's something that the board of directors cannot decide. And so, just like, oh my God, like I'm going to come from all corners of the world and like, show up to the board shareholders meeting or vote by email or mail and vote on it. The board of directors is more kind of like the day-to-day. So in this kind of situation where the HYBE ADOR situation was so small, like the board of directors is like the same as the shareholders, like it's the same meeting. They just kind of flip a switch. They're like, okay, everybody, we're now shifting over to the board meeting instead of the shareholder meeting. They started off with the shareholder meeting in May because thinking like, the shareholders are the most powerful. It just makes more sense. It's not like, it's not a board meeting. It's going to be a shareholder meeting. But based on the contract law, the shareholders actually had less power in that situation to affect a change if Min Hee-jin really wanted to argue contract law. So what they did was they shifted over and said like, okay, the board is going to decide now and we're going to kick her off the board. I'm sorry, you no longer qualify to be the CEO. If you're not the CEO, then basically this agreement that the shareholders made with you in terms of giving you so much money disappears because that was made with the CEO of ADOR and you're no longer the CEO of ADOR. So you could see how like when she created this contract and when also HYBE created the contract, they didn't foresee this battle going all the way to this level. The way that Min Hee-jin had structured her deal, I think, would seem probably even for the most expensive lawyers in Korea adequate. But then if you have the most expensive lawyers in Korea, you find a very, very smart maneuver like this. Now, of course, this is going to play out in probably the media, maybe another press conference, maybe some more dry tears. But Min Hee-jin definitely said that she is opposing this. She didn't resign, but nobody, honey, I don't know who said that she resigned. Nobody said she resigned from HYBE, I'm sure, at least like in all of the newspaper articles. Maybe there were some headlines that kind of said that she resigned, but nobody's arguing that. So she's arguing a thing that didn't even exist. They want you fired. They don't care what you call it. They just want you out of there. And so she's saying like this is unfair, this violates her agreement. So that's what her lawyers are going to argue. But it seems as if it's going to be a very tough thing to fight in court. And the way that it just kind of played out, like, real kind of stealth style and pow, boom. I don't know if she's actually going to be able to win this at all. And who knows, in what state or country her shaman is. But she probably doesn't even have any good advice. So what do you guys think? Are you happy? Do you think it's gonna work? Do you think HYBE really kind of did it? They did it so quietly, and even the explanation now, the whole big thing about like, this is what happened, and we're telling you now. It's kind of like, but what did you do? So I hope this was helpful to explain what they did, because this was a very smart move that I think essentially clinched it. But never say never, especially in these types of battles in Korea. It can change like on a dime next week. All right, guys, put your comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.